became a huge problem and a strong dollar. And that taught me about, okay, we've got a bigger debt bubble that's going on around the world right now. And it's not only in emerging markets, but it's also in the developed markets. So I've been following this narrative of an aging population plus debt, and we'll go into this. This is the macro framework story. But wind forwards, I leave running a hedge fund and move to Spain and start writing macroeconomic research and investment strategy for my research service, Global Macro Investors. I still write today, 18 years later. And I predicted the financial crisis, saw what was coming on, saw there was a recession coming, thought it could be pretty nasty because of this dynamic of debt. So it blows up, Lehman Brothers blow up, and all sorts of people blow up. And as I start digging into that, I start realizing that there was some real structural problems in the financial system. Things like in an indebted economy, there's a lot of leverage, but then there's a bit of collateral, which is the thing that people actually own, and nobody knows who owns it because there's so many claims on it. And this started making me think, oh my God, this is a real issue because nobody knows who owns what. Wind forward to 2012, and the European sovereign debt crisis blows up. This is Italy, Spain, Portugal. And it's very quickly dawned on me that we had two things here. One was this safe asset, because you couldn't create more of it. And the printing of money meant that people were creating more and more of everything. And it also had this thing called the blockchain, which was this recorded ownership of everything. And I thought, my God, this is the answer to the entire world's financial system. And I saw that they were thinking about it as a money transfer layer as well. So it was the blockchain technology that was the most appealing. Anyway, by 2013, I wrote the first ever macroeconomic research piece trying to value Bitcoin, because people didn't really know it was valued. It was really technology people who were into it, and one macro guy, Dan Moorhead. And so I wrote this piece and I basically compared it to gold and said, well, if it's supposed to be digital gold, then let's use the metrics we can value gold. Let's look at the stock to flow, which is i.e. how much gold is in circulation and how much is known to be still underground. And then look at the growth of that and then compare it to Bitcoin and see what it should be valued at. And using a very rough maths, I figured Bitcoin with gold at $1,300 at the time, Bitcoin should be worth about $1 million. And I was like, wow, I didn't expect that. So then I said, okay, look, let's discount me for being a total idiot. And I took it off, which was the biggest regret of my life, even though I bought it back cheap because it went up, it crashed back down again. And I bought it in 2020 and have held it ever since, and then developed a much broader thesis about blockchain technology, smart contracts, NFTs, DeFi, and where this whole space is going. So that's basically the story.
Nice. Great story. Thanks, Raoul. You coined the term pristine collateral and ultrasound money and many others. I wanted to ask you, why is Bitcoin ultrasound money and why is it so important, and what makes you so bullish about Bitcoin? And is it a long-term thesis? Do you see, is it a 10-year thesis? What's the time frame that you're looking?
To be honest, I'm less bullish on Bitcoin versus others because I think others have larger network effects right now. But Bitcoin itself, I came up with the idea of this pristine collateral because we've talked about the collateral layer of leverage. So Bitcoin itself is recorded on the blockchain. So that makes it interesting collateral because you know who owns it. Secondly, you can't create more of it. So if you think about US treasuries, which are the collateral of the world, the Federal Reserve essentially can print more dollars or create more and more treasuries. So your collateral in a crisis, actually the yields fall. And we've seen that in Bitcoin, and we've seen it in most of the adoption effect technologies. Even the internet had this same rate of growth that slows down over time. But what you find is the stability and the volatility of things that get adopted goes down. And the more the volatility goes down, the better it is as a collateral layer for the entire system. And the printing of more money is kind of misunderstood. I think a lot of people think the inflation that we're seeing now is based on monetary printing. I don't believe it is. I believe it was fiscal stimulus plus restricted supply. The monetary printing didn't do that. What it does is it debases a currency. It's kind of a very kind of nasty way of doing things because people don't see it. because what happens is asset prices go up. So everyone thinks they're getting rich, but in fact, all asset prices go up. So your house here goes up relative against other houses, goes relative against the S&P, goes relative against all things. So you actually don't go anywhere. And what we found is that earnings growth weren't going up at household level, real earnings. So people were actually getting poorer because of the debasement of currency. And that's how the debasement of currency works. And once I'd figured out this debasement of currency, which is quantitative easing, then I realized that with interest rates as they are and the structure of global debts and aging demographics, this trick is going to be rolled out in a number of different ways. You know, what we saw is a new way in 2020, which was fiscal stimulus financed by the central banks. So I just thought, well, this is the one big bet. And so not only did I put 100% of my liquid net worth into this,
100%.
but in it, yeah, 100%. Okay. And I'm still roughly there today. And then on top, I built two businesses based on this as well.
And that's not a small amount of liquidity to put 100% in.
Well, it's a lot less today than it was a year ago.
It's going to be more soon.
One day, you know, these are the long-term bet, and I've been through these cycles before. You know, I've ridden it down 85% before, and I'm still, you know, well up on my investments. And you know, the idea is long-term. You know, you add into the moments. See, what you've got right now is a really interesting juncture. You've got the terrible macro, which is liquidity is being withdrawn from the system at a record rate. So we can use, let's say, year-on-year rate of change of M2 or global M2. That's coming off. Bitcoin's highly correlated. All crypto assets are highly correlated, as everything is, because liquidity coming out of the system means the price of the denominator goes up and the value of assets goes down. So what you've got is that reverse effect going on right now. Money's being taken out of the system. It's more scarce, so assets go down. Fine. So we're in the macro cycle and we're waiting for the turn of the macro cycle when eventually the interest rate markets start changing their perspective and say enough's enough. Let's go back to more liquidity. And that'll be the turn in the crypto markets, which I think is coming. Back in 2014, or that gift that we got in 2019 and again in 2020 when we got that sharp correction in COVID, those were the generational wealth making opportunities in crypto. And anybody who participated at those points did extremely well over a long enough time horizon. And time horizon is crucial in this equation. So Bitcoin got on many people's radar screen. The first person that I knew of that got into it from the macro world was Emil Woods and Chad Cascarilla. They're the people who introduced me to Bitcoin. They were clients of mine. Then the next person probably was Dan Moorhead, who was ex-Tiger Management, one of the most famous macro funds. He saw it. He was setting up a macro fund and decided to pivot it entirely to Bitcoin and crypto. Then after that was probably Mark Yusko. And I think Mark had come to some of my global macro investor roundtables, heard some of these guys speak and realized that this is the direction he wanted to take his career. Dan Tapiero, another one who was at some of these events, he also decided to pivot his entire career.